world that claims to be growing more and more concerned about environmental issues, resource supplies, man-made atmospheric changes and pollution, I find it fascinating that no one is talking about the most consistent destroyer of ecology and the most continuous waster of natural resources there is, the pursuit of profit. Before the Neolithic Revolution, it's been well documented by anthropologists that there was a natural balance to the planet. Population was in balance because we could only do what the Earth provided for us naturally. Once we started to control the planet through agriculture, and now through many different means, we began to create disimbalance. We began to create uneven supplies. We began to generate scarcity deliberately for the sake of self-preservation and profit. Money, contrary to the attitudes of most of the world's population today, is not a natural resource, nor does it represent resources. If you read economics, they present it as though it's a science. It's funny, you look at economics books and they have graphs and charts and they make complex novel equations. It's all contrived. It doesn't have any relationship to the natural order of things. In fact, by our standards of logic, money is only functionally relevant in society when natural resources and the mechanisms of creation are scarce. And thus, a system has emerged where people are given value for their skills in exchange for their servitude, which can thus be used as a medium of exchange for those supposed scarce resources. It is based upon a folk way of orienting production and distribution. The entire global economic system is based upon people constantly consuming, irregardless of the state of affairs and natural orders of energy, planetary materials, and anything else. It is blind, narrow consumption with absolutely no regard for the environment. The capitalist economy is founded on the very idea of exchanging property in the markets. Even your labor is a form of property in a sense. The world that we know is so bound up in the process of buying and selling that most just can't imagine any other way of functioning human affairs. Sadly, the culture is now fully indoctrinated into this frame of reference. And like the rising sun, most cannot even consider any other possibility for social functionality. Yet, with all of this obsession over property, very few ask the question, why do we have property to begin with? The answer is simple. It's scarcity. Property is an outgrowth of scarcity. The farther we go back in time, the more difficult and time-consuming it was for people to create tools or extract a resource. They, in turn, protected it because it had immense value relative to the labor entailed along with the possible scarcity associated. People claim ownership because it is a legal form of protection. Property is not an American or free enterprise or capitalist idea. It is an ancient mental perspective necessitated from generations of scarcity. If there isn't scarcity, the rationale for property becomes an irrelevant issue. The fact is, most of the original problems which require the development of the economic system we see today are no longer pressing due to the dramatic advancement of science and technology. We now have the means to move into a new paradigm, one where the negative byproducts of our current social establishment, such as perpetual war, human exploitation, poverty, and environmental destruction, are no longer tolerable. Regardless of how logical, clear, and obvious new ideas may seem, the public still remains, on average, a tremendous fear of any form of social change. This is largely due to the propaganda and indoctrination which has been pushed upon them by the established powers, which, of course, prefer to maintain their power. These institutions range from religious organizations to government to business. There are a great number of people out there that know that something is wrong, but they do not understand the source of that wrongness because they are in the box of indoctrination. People are locked into a box. They see the box around them. They see the leaks and the holes and the cracks, and they go up to the cracks and they try to fix them. They try to patch the holes. But they don't stop to think that maybe there's something wrong with the box itself. Maybe the integrity of the box that they exist in is inherently invalid. It's inherently void. The economic system that we live in is a parasitic paradigm that
is only going to lead to self-destruction. But people don't see that. So if you attack the economic system for what it actually is, everyone's feathers go up. Everyone says, well, wait a minute, this is the world we all live. We live in a profit-based, labor-for-income world, cyclical consumption. This is what we're used to. We understand we have division of classes. You know, they throw in human nature. They throw in everything that will try to make it seem like it's a part of the natural order of reality when it in fact is not. So in other words, the biggest crutch to the evolution of human thought is breaking your own indoctrination. It's very, very difficult to overcome emotional elements that have become so ingrained in you that you have an immediate reaction, an immediate suffering and pain when anything interferes with that. It's a very, very complex problem. We have to learn how to identify and break our own indoctrination if we expect to move forward at all as a civilization.
The cultural values and the education barriers of our conditioned culture is the most difficult aspect to consider. Concurrently, society itself is a culture machine. So in other words, society reaps what it sows. If your society's foundation inherently supports self-interest, elitism, greed, and dishonesty, then no one should ever be surprised when certain members of society continuously fall into the extremity of murder, financial corruption, or indifferent selfish gain. In other words, society is not only a product of the sum of its members' values, paradoxically, it's also a generator of them for each new generation.
The self-appointed guardians of the status quo are birthed in religion, birthed in economics, birthed in the illusion of democracy that we see today across the world, birthed in the various isms that are entirely pointless: capitalism, communism, fascism, socialism, the self-appointed guardians of the status quo. People that are suffering in the system just like anyone else, but their social identification is so powerful, they are so locked into the box, that they find it infuriating to think that what they're living is actually wrong, paradoxically.
And as far as the infamous they, it is simply another social distortion, culminated and reinforced by our environment. There is no singular they. There's a massive superstitious basis out there. It's us against them that is extremely poisonous to the development, because people are constantly looking for someone else to blame when it's really themselves, because they continue to perpetuate the system that creates these things. But that is still a product. These are still human beings. We're dealing with negative tendencies. The real issue is human behavior. And human behavior is largely created and reinforced by the social patterns required for survival, as necessitated by the social system of the period. We are products of our society, and the fact of the matter is, it is the very foundation of our socioeconomic system and environmental condition which has created the sick culture you see around you. All social systems, regardless of political philosophy, religious beliefs, or social customs, ultimately depend upon natural resources as the initial step towards social functionality.
The problem with humanity is we're ripped apart. There are far too many ideologies out there that have no basis on anything tangible. All Orthodox religions, at least Western religions, there might be a few elements of Hinduism and Buddhism that are an exception, to me is no different than the isms of state associations that we see in our political sphere, meaning communism, socialism, fascism, capitalism. These are ideas that have been created that have no relevance to nature whatsoever. In other words, they have absolutely no relevance to the carrying capacity of the earth, to our ability to support ourselves, to our ability to produce, to the methods of production, to the methods of distribution, to the way we orient society and keep ourselves alive and keep ourselves healthy and prosper, and for the betterment of what I consider to be the organism of the human species as a single organism. None of those beliefs have anything to do with any of that. And that's a problem. We have created an economic structure, a religious, philosophical structure that is absolutely decoupled from anything tangible and real. And these ideologies are what will destroy the human species and destroy the planet. Humanity has to start thinking about its relationship to the earth. Until it does so, we're fucking doomed. Complex novel equations, it's all contrived. It doesn't have any relationship to the natural order of things.
In fact, by our standards of logic, money is only functionally relevant in society when natural resources and the mechanisms of creation are scarce. And thus, a system has emerged where people are given
Self-preservation and profit.
money, contrary to the attitudes of most of the world's population today, is not a natural resource, nor does it represent resources.
If you read economics, they present it as though it's a science. It's funny, you look at economics books and they have graphs and charts and they make a population was in balance because we could only do what the earth provided for us naturally. Once we started to control the planet through agriculture and now through many different means, we began to create disimbalance. We began to create uneven supplies. We began to generate scarcity deliberately for the sake of...
And the most continuous waster of natural resources there is, the pursuit of profit.
Before the Neolithic Revolution, it's been well documented by anthropologists that there was a natural balance to the planet.
In a world that claims to be growing more and more concerned about environmental issues, resource supplies, man-made atmospheric changes and pollution, I find it fascinating that no one is talking about the most consistent destroyer of ecology